Way back before the pandemic began, I had a question. What does it take for a city person to go country? In 2015, I set out to explore through photography, writing, and now this podcast. In February, I recorded most of the interviews for the first season. I had planned to launch in April of 2020, the 5-year anniversary of the project. But then everything turned upside down, and it just didn't feel like the right time to launch because so much had changed overnight. As the initial shock of the pandemic wore off, it became clear that many people with the means to do so were leaving cities in droves. Recent data has shown that nearly 16 million people have relocated in the U.S. this year, making the concept of an urban exodus even more relevant. So while some of the interviews in this season were conducted before the pandemic, the topics they discuss, the questions they raise, and the answers they provide are more urgent than ever. I'm Melissa Hessler. Welcome to the Urban Exodus. I am excited to invite you to my conversation with Sherri Powell, the founder of the mission-driven gift box company, Yours Rurally. Sherri was raised in a small town in Georgia, but moved to D.C. after college and built a successful career on Capitol Hill before moving to the corporate world in New York City. Growing up in a struggling rural community with a per capita income of under $9,000 a year, Sherri's great passion in life is rural advocacy. She created Yours Rurally to support and celebrate rurally based entrepreneurs. Sherri has been an inspiration and guiding force to me this year. Without her encouragement and friendship, I probably wouldn't have finished this podcast. So I'm really excited to share our candid conversation about all things rural and what a truly wild ride 2020 has been. First off, tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, how it informs who you are today, and how you ended up, moving to the city and starting your career.
Born and raised in a small rural area in South Georgia, where my dad is from, and went to public high school there. It's Wheeler County, Georgia. It is now today considered the third poorest county in the United States, and was very much that way during my childhood and upbringing there. Just a town where truly are just rural in every way, where everyone knows each other. You go to school with the same person from pre-K to graduating from 12th grade. And then after high school, I went to the University of Georgia on the Hope Scholarship, which covered tuition, which was fantastic. And then after undergrad, I moved to D.C., Washington, D.C., because I was a political science major. I knew that I wanted to work in the political arena in some way. And so I moved to DC and worked for a congressman from Arizona. And I was a staff assistant, which basically means you're answering the phones. You're basically the office secretary and you're serving constituents. Truly started at the very, very bottom in terms of a Capitol Hill career. And I was only with him for about 3 months when the senator at the time from Georgia passed away. And the governor appointed Zell Miller to fill that Senate seat. And so I thought, well, it would be really neat to actually serve my home state in this way. So as soon as Zell Miller was appointed, I literally walked over to the office and introduced myself, and then got an opportunity to work for him, to actually work for my home state. So I stayed in DC for 12 long years, and then decided that just wanted to change of scenery, and was really hoping to move to Colorado, just for the nature and just for the sunshine, and I was just really attracted to Colorado. And so I job searched there, nothing came to fruition, and I ended up moving to Brooklyn. I was going to work for the New York State government, and then just before my start date, Hurricane Sandy happened. The office building where I was going to work was damaged. And so, there was a delay in start date. And during that delay, the person I was going to report to actually left. So for a year, I was really just hanging out. And during that time, I actually met my now husband. and then eventually started hustling in terms of finding a job. And so went into back to the corporate space, working for an insurance company, AIG, and I was there for 5 years. Shortly after having my daughter, just sort of wanted to do something a little bit different, and then went into a fintech company, which was China based, but they had this New York, newly opened New York office. And I don't know if we should jump into this direct, now, but I just knew, this whole time, just knew that there was something that else I should be doing, just something that was more aligned with my own values, and something that was just a bit more impactful in terms of community. And I know we talked about this before, but this transition was hard because just growing up again the way I did, and especially from a financial perspective, right? Not growing up with a lot of means and nowhere close to having anything that resembled wealth, and suddenly having an income that was pretty respectful. It's hard to sort of transition out of that. And that took, I was in corporate for way longer than maybe I should have been, just because, it was financially safe and frankly good. And so,
Yeah.
I would even say that even when after I left Capitol Hill, truthfully, I had this idea of doing something advocacy related. I just didn't know how to do it, right? While still making some money. And during my time, at AIG, I remember sitting in my in my office some days, and I would literally browse the stories on urban exodus and sort of daydream and use those as examples of an inspiration in terms of what I could possibly do. I knew that farming was not. I just knew that wasn't an option for me, just because. Just for a million reasons. And so, but just browsing the website for inspiration, and really just what some of the folks who've made that transition, how do they do it and still make money? And so bookmarking ideas and just thinking about how can I make this work for me in a way that I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm also able to still make a living. And so then there was a situation where, I love gifting. I love putting a lot of thought in it. I love doing it in a beautiful way. And so and this business model is certainly not new. And so I just thought, well, number one, the startup costs are pretty doable. I didn't see that this existed anywhere else in terms of what yours really does. And so I knew that I would love it because these are my people, right? This is the type of person who I admire and who inspires me. So if I can actually get to know their work and their product and build a relationship with them, then it's a win-win for everyone. And I enjoyed the process, right? So I started yours really for myself as a need that I wanted, right? Where it's just, this exists. I don't have to sit down and do the research and come up with something beautiful myself. It's already done for me. So in some ways it was just, I'm the customer, the ideal customer.
Tell us about your journey to Callicoon and how you found your home there.
So that idea also came about after my daughter was born. Shortly after I moved to New York, I knew that I immediately started to find somewhere to get away, because I did that all throughout DC too, where on the weekends I was on a trail or camping, because it's just, I just need it from a mental health standpoint. And so that's just always been, just kind of a part of my lifestyle. And so shortly after I moved here, I knew I'd seek out the same here, which was easy with the Catskills being so close to New York City. So my third weekend in New York, I discovered this area in Callicoon. And so, just come up for hikes and canoe trips just by myself, because at that time I just didn't really know many people in New York. So it was just hanging out on the weekends, spending time whenever I had the free time. And then after my daughter was born, I knew that I wanted her to have exposure to this type of life as well. And so 7 months after she was born, we started to look for real estate. Eventually we did. It was, just for the weekend. Sometimes it would be, we'd only come up once a month if things were, if work was, if we were busy with work, it would just be, just whenever we could make it. So we were doing this. This was just a place for us to come on the weekends up until early March. And as soon as the numbers started to go up, my husband was laid off. So at that point, it was a no-brainer to come up for the long haul. And of course, at that point, we thought it would be 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Here we are on month 8 or 7 or 8. So, and have, it's still a conversation that we're having, but this is pretty much, we're digging in, and this is now home.
What has it felt like to live there full time as opposed to just coming on the weekends? What have you learned? New things have you learned about your community there?
So for yours, really, it has been a complete and total godsend in some ways. I mean, it's just been so easy for me to meet fellow makers and fellow entrepreneurs, just now saying that I'm based here and I'm here. This is home. When I make a cold email or a cold call to a potential vendor and I can say, this is where I'm based, the conversation is warm within a minute at that point, right? I mean, it's just an instant community because now I'm here. It's been a game changer for the business in so many ways. The vendors who I source from, some of them are my neighbors, and that's powerful to be able to say that to a potential corporate client or a bride and groom who wants to gift for their wedding. So it's been, for the business, it's just been, just fantastic. Personally, my partner, he's definitely happier in the city life that we had. So there's a little bit of tension there, to be completely frank and candid. For my child, I just can't, it gives me so much joy just to say that I'm raising her here every day. In so many ways, as hard as this all is, I pinch myself that I'm able to give this experience to her, during this time, especially just to be able to, when we talk about homeschool, I just feel like I'm so fortunate in the sense that we walk outside and we talk about the leaves changing colors. During the summer, we were on the river every day and it was just, like, these are lessons. Like, this is teaching resilience. This is teaching water safety. It's everything. And not that we couldn't have done things like that in the city, but I just feel overwhelmed in terms of graciousness, just that I have this classroom that's called rural America, right? And then from my mental health, it's also just been, it's been my therapy, my medicine, to be able to literally go half a mile down the road and do a hike, right? It's been just mentally, I'm so thankful. I don't know. I could not have ridden this pandemic out with ease or grace in New York City. I just know, just knowing myself, I could not have. So many other people can and are, and that's terrific. But just for myself, I know I would have had a really hard time. So I think what's helping me get through these days is just being sure that I take time to connect with people who are willing to be real, who are truly being authentic in the struggles they're having right now, right? Not making it seem flowery and glossy and untrue, right? So every conversation I have like that, where I feel like there's I get validation from that. I feel like it's just a reminder that we're all in a difficult place right now. And it's not easy for anyone. So just reminding myself of that is helpful. And also just, really just trying to show up in a more present way, no matter what it is, whether I'm, packing a gift, right? Just being sure that that's fully what I'm focused on at that time. If I'm out picking apples with Tekla, making sure that I'm fully focused on that, like really just trying to be disciplined about being as present as possible is helpful.
How has your daughter adjusted?
That has been a bit tough for me, just as a witness. I think that she is completely not missed a beat and she's as happy as ever. I actually think she's her development is, everything seems great and normal. I do feel like, as someone, she was in daycare full time during our time in the city. So to go from having that socialization all day, 5 days a week, to none has been as a mom, to see that, I think has been challenging. I really don't know if, she's affected by it or if she's, she doesn't show any emotions around that. I think it's more of me internalizing that. But at the same time, when I can balance that with what she is getting and what she's been exposed to, all in all, I think everything is great. And she's in good shape. And she's just popped in here.
Cutie. Hi, Tekla.
Hi. I can't see you.
You can't.
I can't see you either, but I can imagine your adorable little face.
We will do a FaceTime or something soon. Can you go back downstairs, please?
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, she's so cute.
Are you a small, rurally based business looking for high-quality photography to expand your customer reach and elevate your brand? Let the photography and brand experts at Hessler Creative help your business reach its full potential. Leave all the guesswork in their skillful hands and have a curated and dynamic gallery of images created for you. Hessler Creative has helped numerous small businesses rise above the noise and establish a loyal and broad customer base. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Browse their portfolio and brand photography packages on hesslercreative.com.
I think one thing that we talked about earlier that is particularly timely is this idea of rural America feeling very closed off and scary for non-white people. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your experience about wanting to move to a place, what it feels like to kind of suss out a place, things that maybe white people would never even think about when it comes from making a transition from a city to a rural area.
That's actually a topic that's heavy on my mind right now, too, because I'm truly trying to encourage more of my peers and friends to think about a transition like this, especially now that so many folks can work remotely and especially my friends with kids. I'm really trying to encourage people to consider this. But when I'm doing that, when I'm having those conversations, I'm also incredibly mindful of what that could look like for a person of color, for a Black person, right? I say all the time that I didn't make this decision lightly. I will say that I feel a bit more comfort and courage because of how I grew up. And so a lot of these spaces are just familiar to me. And so, but I never lose sight of how that can feel to someone who didn't grow up the way I did. I know there's a lot of, it's heavy, right? That line of thinking can be incredibly heavy. I mean, for me, it is still. So for someone who, doesn't feel as familiar to a rural area, it's just that times 1,000. So I was telling a friend this story a few weeks ago because even though I was born and raised where I was born and raised, and I still have fears. I mean, there are times where in this community, we need a mechanic. And so, things run through my mind before I drive up to a mechanic station. I mean, it's just the reality. And so, my husband being, of European descent, sometimes I send him first, right? Go make sure that this is a safe space where I'll be welcomed. Maybe it's exaggerated. I don't know, but I just have to do that for my own peace of mind. Pre-pandemic, we'd come up and it was the same thing for a bar. We want to go have a beer. Well, can you go there first and grab something and then let me know what the vibe is before I go? And so it's, we have to think about things like that. And so when I'm talking to my friends about potentially seeking out real estate and potentially moving here, that's also a part of the conversation. I've been having these conversations over the past 8 months. I welcome it because this is something that also all my life we never talk about. We just don't think about it. And I just feel like now we owe it to ourselves to be honest about what's real and what's true. And that is reality. And we need to, if we can't talk about these issues candidly now, I just don't know when we can. I've been saying to people that if you are a rural progressive, if you're a rurally based progressive right now, you have got to speak up. You have got to use your platform, no matter how big or how small. Like, now is the time for you to show people that that they have allies, right? That they have support if they move to these areas. Like, this is the time. Like, we all should be just using every opportunity to be vocal about our progressive presence in rural spaces. I mean, we just should. There's just not been a more ripe time to do that. Another thing that I will mention is shortly after the George Floyd situation came to light and, the Black Lives Movement started to, just become more prominent in June. At one point I started to sort of rethink Yours Rurally because I just remember at some point, in the middle of the night, just thinking this is kind of wild because the mission of Yours Rurally is to support rurally based brands and organizations. And I vet them and I know that their values are to some degree aligned with mine, but it was just crazy that I was that I felt this fear that the whole premise of the business was to advocate for a population that I suddenly felt very afraid of. I was so worried about posting something on Instagram about the movement and social justice because, I had this fear that if someone in my hometown saw it, would they do something to my family, And it was just wow. Like I felt so scared of suddenly what I was doing.
This year has felt like a great awakening in our nation when it comes to both acknowledging and wanting to dismantle systemic racism. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just people spending more time at home and paying closer attention?
For a while, I just kept trying to understand why it was that all of these Black people had been murdered by cops or their fellow citizens based on their race. And I couldn't understand why there never been such a big outcry. That's the answer. I mean, people were just finally paying attention.
It's easy for people to just focus on the things that are going on in their lives. And I mean, it's a cultural thing in the United States too, right? To say that you're always so busy. That's like a respected word. Oh, we're so busy right now. And then all of a sudden to like strip that away a little bit and then really pay attention.
Yeah, it's oh my gosh, I could talk to you all day. But it's so funny that you raised the point about folks wearing the label of being busy as a badge of honor, because it's also just something that I've just, especially living in DC and then in New York, where people's careers are so important and how busy they are and connected they are is so important. And and sometimes I just get a good chuckle about that. And sometimes it gets me into big heated arguments because I have always said that there's a narrative around if you live in New York, you have to be a hustler and you have to be high energy, fast paced. And I just never allowed myself to buy into that. I just didn't. And I also just think it's dangerous. And it has really caused a lot of arguments amongst people who pride themselves on living in New York City. 3 years ago, I hired someone who moved to New York for the job. They moved from Texas, and she was younger and super bright, great. But I could just tell that she brought with her the need to sort of fit that image, a stereotype of being, if she's going to succeed in New York, she needed to have that sort of competitive, go, never sleep at night type thing. You don't have to do that. And that's why I just see a danger in sort of, I've just always kind of found it funny that in these settings, I've always just been like, well, I'm a country to my core. On the weekends, I get out of here. I try to live slowly, even when I'm here, just because another perspective of you don't have to be that person to be okay in New York City or in any city, right?
Honestly, I would say that some of the best leaders and some of the best people that I've worked with are people who are exactly like you, who know how to set up those boundaries, know how to create space where they can recharge, because otherwise your burnout rate is so fast. And I mean, honestly, when I moved to Maine, I was burnt. I was so burnt out. I was going a mile a minute. And I really believed that hype. And I really believed that, my value was what my job title was. And that takes so long to untangle yourself from, if that's the reality that you're living in. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, you don't have to just move to the country and completely slow down. You can actually implement some of these really good things in your city existence to improve your life that way if you aren't ready for taking that big leap.
It's funny. I feel like I am at that place now where you were when you first made your move, or even now when someone says, "Oh, what do you do?" It's still a little tricky to say. And I think the first 7 months or so, just kind of once I knew I was going to make this transition, it would be a situation where, and I'm sure you relate to this, where I'd say, "Oh, I'm starting this company, but my background is in." I don't have to add that caveat. I don't care. Some days, I don't know. So it's still a struggle. I mean, it's the identity shift is real.
What ways have you been reaching out to people during the pandemic so that you can feel more connected there?
So we have actually made some connections at the weekly farmers market. It's just been a great way to meet other families with kids. And so we have, that's sort of our play date where everyone comes masked, and our farmers market is along a river. And so while one parent is shopping, the other can take the kids down by the river to run around. And we've gotten a couple of emails from transplants who are interested in pods. So I'm assuming that people are creating those, and we will hold off on that until maybe spring. But I know that, those are in motion as well. It's just funny how things work out timing wise, just to the point that you just made about the business and then being able to dig in from a rural location, but also just everything that happened over the summer, I think too, has just been, the timing is just wild, because what we were talking about earlier around the fears of, being either a liberal or a progressive or Black or whatever it is in a rural area, everything that happened this summer just exposed so much. It just put so much out there. And so, we come in here in March, and then all of this happening in June, and then I'm being able to go out and be a part of these local rallies and marches, and then meeting people that way. And you already know that you have shared values because you're at the march, right? So, even that has just been, I think about that, and it just floors me how the timing just all worked out. And so I think that all the unrest and all of the bad that happened over the summer, I think that people were able to form alliances that way too, and sort of start to add to their community up here in that way. You just immediately found like-minded people because of the crisis.
I think that one thing that you really understand that maybe new transplants that have moved from the city because of the pandemic maybe wouldn't, is what it means to, really invest in a community, to be there for the long haul, to not maybe feel like a tourist. What things you can do to really start to feel like, hey, this is actually where I'm settling. I'm not just continuing my city life, but in a rural area.
Yeah. And that's actually a very good and interesting question. I was just having this conversation with my husband a few nights ago. We were having the conversation about schools. And so, once the pandemic is over, do we dig in, and then do we, does Tekla go to school here? Or, how do we make that all work? Like, how do you truly become a part of the community? And I think that goes back to, sort of what yours really is built around. It's really figuring out a way to invest in home. Like, if this is going to be your home, you have to be intentional about investing in that. Like, you can't sit around and put your child, keep her, either homeschool him or her, or do these pods with ignoring the fact that there's a public school infrastructure here. You have to be, I don't care how you do it. Like, if it's just your taxes, if it's just this, just that, there are different ways to do it, but you have to be sure that you're a part of that in some way, somehow. Same with, Main Street businesses. This is where you buy your groceries now. You don't go back to Brooklyn to Whole Foods, right? And, you may pay a bit more, but you have to be committed to doing that, because if this is home, it's just your responsibility, period. There's just no other way around it. It's the right thing to do, and it's what we should all be doing.
Thank you for listening to my interview with Sherri Powell. Now, normally, this is a part where we give you an update on how Sherri is doing since we last spoke, because we recorded this interview in the early days of the pandemic in April. But the news from last week of the insurrection at the Capitol is just too big to ignore. And the rise of white supremacy affects all of us, no matter where we live. Sherri was a Senate aide on Capitol Hill, and this attempted coup happened in the offices and hallways where she worked for over 12 years of her career. I knew I had to talk to her about last week's events and the collective response from politicians, law enforcement, media, and the general public. So I called her up again this week to discuss. So first off, Sherri, you worked on Capitol Hill for many years as an aide to a Georgian senator. Can you tell me how you felt watching this attempted violent coup unfold?
I will say that it was a mixture of feeling sad and heartbroken, and also pissed and mad and infuriated. It's, one of the things I have been thinking about, though, is how I didn't feel shocked, right? It didn't surprise me. And that's scary, because it's one of the most shocking things in the history of our country. Yet in that moment, I personally felt no shock. I Just felt like the writing had been on the wall for so long. So was indeed consumed by just heartbreak, right? Just feeling so much empathy for what the people on the Hill were feeling at that moment, the fear, how scared they must have been, how nervous and worried their families had to have been watching this on TV. The employees on the Hill who don't sign up for this, right? They go to work to serve food, to make good food for members and staffers. They don't sign up to experience something like this. So the folks in the cafeteria, the janitors, just how they must have been feeling. That was the thought that was constantly running through my mind. One of the things that has also just been a theme of thinking amongst some of my peers, just on when we're group texting and having these conversations, is really how thankful I think we all feel for the pandemic, which is just an odd thing to say, but thank God for COVID right now and the fact that there were less people on the Hill when this happened. On any normal day, that Capitol building would have been filled with teenagers and young kids and senior citizens enjoying a tour of the Capitol and enjoying their being in the people's house, right? And so it's just so thank God we were quarantining and we're self-isolating and we're at home, and staffers were serving probably at half capacity because of the pandemic, because I think this could have been a lot worse otherwise. So the folks I know who were there are, I think also just feel enraged, right? People are just angry. I think more than anything, sad for sure, but just angry that a group of people can do this and also can potentially get away with it, right? There's only been a couple of arrests. How is this possible?
The response to it has been particularly shocking and telling. I've been really struck by the radio silence in social media, especially after June with all of these black squares and showing of solidarity. Why do you think it's really important right now that white people who do not believe in white supremacy continuing to be the norm speak up?
This topic is almost overwhelming to talk about it, because it's again just the level of infuriation and disappointment, and frankly embarrassment, because I think so many people are embarrassing themselves in this moment by failing to step up and speak up. Back in June and over the summer, I felt like so many of us were saying that if this is not the moment that you speak up, I don't know when is. And yet here we are again saying the exact same thing. So what does it take? What does it take for people to feel pulled to use their platform for good, to make a statement for what's right? What does it take? If this doesn't do it, Alyssa, I just don't know where we go from here. I just don't. It's just a deflating feeling to see how people are failing to use their voice right now.
And what would you say to people who, maybe they don't have a lot of followers, or they feel powerless to actually create real change, and they're tired, and I get those things. Like, the pandemic has been brutal and people are out of work, or they just feel like they don't have the emotional energy. What would you say to those people?
I say that I truly believe that it doesn't matter how large or how small your following is. At this point, your silence is a complete and total indication of being complicit. There's just no way around it. Listen, here's the thing. If you, and as a mom, I can say this, if you can post a beautiful photo of your child playing in the snow, you can post a photo of a text that says, I condemn racism. I condemn white supremacy. It's not that hard. You don't have to engage in the conversations. You don't have to, if you don't want to engage in the comments, that's fine. Just say something. Just say something, because people being silent over the past 4 years is exactly why last Wednesday happened. It's easy for us to say, well, the Republican members of the Senate let so much slide for 4 years. The Republican members of the House were silent for 4 years. But it's also, we hold ourselves responsible too. We have a part to play in this as well. It's not just elected officials. It's us as mere citizens. It's us as community leaders. It's us as parents, right? It's all of us. No matter where you sit in this society, you have a voice. And so, yes, let's hold our electeds accountable, but let's hold ourselves accountable.
And what would you say to people who are like, all right, I hear you, and I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to be brave and I'm going to speak out against these things. What are some things that they can do? I mean, obviously call your Congress people, call your senators. What are some other things that you would recommend that they invest their time and energy into?
I think in addition to calling your representatives and your senators, also just as simple as saying something, whether that's on social media, whether that's at dinner time when your family is sitting around the table, whether that's when you're Zooming with your grandma and your grandpa who may be struggling with how they feel about this and who may very well be on the wrong side of history. Use that time to diplomatically speak up and say something and make your own views known. There's also so many organizations doing impactful work as related to racial justice throughout this country. Just learn, figure out how to get involved, donate your time, donate your money. I have to say that we're in the process of organizing and getting ready to launch a national initiative next week. I can't wait to share more in the coming days, but that will be a great opportunity for people to join this movement, dig in, and let's collectively figure out how to move forward for better. But I know that organizations too, we have to make it simple for people to get involved, make it easy because people are busy. That's just the reality. But again, I feel like at this moment in history, in this moment in time in this country, we have to be uncomfortable and we might have to be tired for a little while. We might have to just sacrifice a little bit of sleep, sacrifice a little bit of money and try to make a difference because, this won't be easy and you can't expect it to be easy. You just have to commit and do the work.
You and I both are based in rural America, and obviously a lot of the audience of this podcast and the website are rural Americans. What would you say specifically to rural Americans who feel like, gosh, I don't want rural America to be represented in this way? What would you say to them on actions that they need to be taking right now to speak out against this?
I would say the first thing we as rural Americans need to do, Alyssa, is really be honest. Really be honest with ourselves, with our neighbors. It's easy for us to say this is not who we are, but is this who we are? I mean, we really have to have a real conversation about that. Is this who our neighbors are? Is this who our community citizens are? Like, is this who we are? Because, it's hard to talk about this, but some of this is because of what rural communities are creating and allowing to happen. So I think our first start is to really be okay with having hard, candid conversations full of candor because, I've said this over and over, but the rural narrative has been hijacked in so many ways by the media, by individuals, by politicians. It's easy for someone who's not rural to say that, this is what rural America is full of. It's wrong, but it's easy to understand why that stereotype exists. And I think until we start to have conversations that are filled with truth about it, we're not going to make progress. So I think we have to be willing to have the conversations. We need to figure out ways to hold people accountable. I don't know if calling people out for what they're doing is the right way, but I also feel like not doing that is also wrong. So it's, just really figuring out how to bring things to surface and bring things to light without being worried about, hurting people's feelings, because unless you want this to be the perception of your demographic, you're going to have to dig deep and make some changes, right? And do some hard stuff.
I think that one thing that I just recently did, which felt like a revelation, but it wasn't, it really wasn't. I just stopped following people who were trying to sell me stuff that weren't talking about this, that weren't being honest. If they're trying to sell me things online and they aren't calling this out for what it is, then I'm done. That's just like one small thing that people can do if they just feel like, what do I do? How do I do this? And if those people are being sponsored by brands that you buy from, contact those brands and say, hey, this influencer that you're working with is not representing your demographic of people, your customers. And maybe you need to rethink that conversation.
I could not agree more. I I did something similar back in June, and I have not looked back. I just, I know you and I have spoken about this in the past, but not only is it important how we spend our money, but it's also important how we spend our time and where we direct our energy. And so when I'm going through my feed, I just don't need to see, I don't need to see the fake, the phony, the ones who are failing to be an ally right now, the ones who are failing to show courage right now, the ones who are being cowards. There's so many other things I'd rather focus my energy on. And so good riddance. It's simple. It's who do you want to walk through this world with when things are good and when things are bad? It's just like marriage, right? I mean, it really is. It's who's going to be there for you and with you during the struggle. And those who are not, I mean, what's the point? Why stick around?
What response to you would be the right response for moving forward through this?
So in addition to individuals just really realizing the full power that they have, and how powerful their voice is, how powerful one statement can be, just as a mere individual walking through this world. I think that it's important, and it's a responsibility we all hold to understand. But I also think that there is going to be collectively, we have to also figure out a way to use our power as a collective. Like people who are really trying to move forward in this country to make things better, we have to figure out how we do that collectively. There's so many different agendas, so many priorities in different organizations. But how do we use that power to really, really not forget this day, right? Don't forget this. In May, June, July, we have to keep the energy. We have to keep focused on the goal of making things better and preventing violence from getting worse. So how do we be sure to collectively use the energy, keep up the momentum, and really impact and make some change?
Sherri, I have to say that, and maybe this will be inspiring to other people as well. I have never really been silent about these things in my personal life, but it really took just like this last year to realize that I actually had a voice and that I did have power and that I needed to say these things out loud. And all that I have gained from it has been positive. And I want other people to know that that's what you can have. You can have a positive, and you can feel like you're promoting change. And even if you're a tired mom, which is what I am, a tired mom, small business owner, like I feel like I actually can do things to work towards a better future for all. And I just want other people to know that they have that same power. And I honestly think that you were a part of giving me that power. And so I really wanted to speak to you today so that you could share that. Share that energy to make people feel courageous and to make them feel like you can do this. It isn't hard. And once you do it, you're going to feel so good that you're going to want to keep doing it. And you're going to stay the course because this is the right side of history.
That's right.
This is what has needed to happen for over 400 years. Like, let's do it now. Let's not wait any longer, or white supremacy will just continue to pop up and rear its ugly head over and over and over, and we'll never put this to bed.
That's exactly right. And I would just add on to that too. It's a matter of, just really in your quiet moments, think about what is it that you're gaining from being silent? How is that, how does your silence feel, right? Like, how does that help you? What good is coming from that? And especially to parents, if for nothing else, speak up and stand up and act for the sake of your kids and the future that they're going to inherit. And that sounds a little cliche, but it's so true. If for nothing else, do it to model what's right for your kids, and do it to ensure that they grow up in a safe country where people respect differences. That's it. It's not complicated. And no one's saying that you need to, you know, after a long day of work and parenting and cleaning and cooking and doing the dishes, no one is saying that you need to sit down at your dinner table and write a long letter to your senator or your member of Congress. No one's saying that you need to donate thousands and thousands of dollars. And no one's saying that you have to travel somewhere to march, but just speak up. It's really, really that simple. Now, if you have the resources, I think, to get involved financially, then by all means, I think that that's powerful and that should be done as well. But again, the sacrifice doesn't have to be that big. We all have a role to play. And to your point, I'll say too that this may be shocking, but as a Black woman, a proud ruralist, even I, up until this past year, even I just, I didn't use not that I'm by no means a social media influencer or I have a large following. And but even on my social platforms, I never felt compelled to put my views out publicly or, engage in dialogue around these issues. And for whatever reason, I just didn't. And so, even in personal conversations with friends and family, I just, that was just, I never felt compelled to be involved, not necessarily be involved, but lead those conversations. But again, this is just all too important to be quiet.
Yeah. We find ourselves at a point in history where we are given no other option than to choose a side. The side of good is obvious.
You're exactly right. Just now is not the time to straddle the fence. You are absolutely right. Could not agree more. And again, when you're doing that, just really go inside and do some inner reflecting and understand if you are choosing to do that, why, right? Be honest. Why? Is it because you don't want to lose followers? Is it because you think people won't buy your product? Is it because you're afraid people are going to verbally attack you online? What are you afraid of? Because I can guarantee you that the consequences that you're thinking might happen pale in comparison to what people are violently feeling when they're attacked on the streets, when they're shot by cops, when they're potentially murdered doing their job on Capitol Hill, right? So you're not a victim. You are not a victim right now. So speak up.
Being tired and feeling like you don't have the emotional energy for something, that isn't an excuse because you have the choice to do that. And that is a privilege. And you have to use that privilege for good if you want the world to be a better place.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Oh, thank you, Sherri. I hope that this conversation helps inspire people to feel more courageous and to really understand the weight of what happened. I think that maybe, this has been an extremely difficult time and people are just putting their head down and trying to get through. But I want people to know just how important it is right now to come together and say that this is not right. This will not stand.
Another thing that I will just add that I did, this happened a bit in June and through the summer, and it's a little bit now over the past couple of days. But I tell people if you want to email me, if you want to jump on a Zoom, if you want to have a call to talk something out, if you're a mom who's juggling working and parenthood and still figuring out ways to be involved and make a difference and just really just show up. Just DM us, right? Just, it's not, just, this is not, there's no hostility here. Just let's have conversation. So DM us, happy to, again, get on a call, talk it out, type it out, whatever it is. We can figure this out together. If people are truly wanting to do what's right, but don't know how. Don't be afraid to ask. I know there's a lot of chatter around the truth around the fact that people are, we don't exist to be teachers and we're tired and et cetera. And I agree with that. And I understand that sentiment. But at the same time, if there are people who truly want to dig in and be of help, but don't know how, just ask. And I'm willing to, and I know there are many others who are willing to, just be there to talk it out. And
I mean, I'm there. You don't have to carry that emotional labor. If anyone wants to talk it out and wants to ask how they can be brave in this time, you send me a direct message on Instagram and I will empower you to make those moves in your life. And I promise that you're going to feel so much better.
That's right.
This is real me. This is the real person that you're going to get. I don't feel like I'm living a lie or I'm putting any of these things on. And that's a weight that you carry if you can't be your full true self. And eventually people are going to find out.
Yep.
One way or the other.
And also, I mean, this sounds a little bit, this sounds more celebratory than maybe it should. But why would you not want to be a part of change? It to your point, it feels good. I mean, it feels good. I mean, it's just to be a part of something bigger than yourself, bigger than your own family, bigger than your own day-to-day responsibilities and exhaustion. It feels good to be a part of something. It's just like high school when you're a part of a club or you're playing a sport, right? It's being a part of a team who's going to do the right thing.
Well, and if you want to see inspiring people doing good things, then seek those people out because they exist online. And if you aren't following those people, remove all of your followers of people who aren't in that category and find those people, because my feed is just the most incredible, inspiring, uplifting people that make me feel like continue to make me feel courageous and continue to make me feel like there's good in this world and that we're going to be moving forward through this nightmare. And so I just encourage everybody to find those people because it'll make you feel a heck of a lot better right now, because it is hard. The weight of everything it feels crushing.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, I will just add to that new community that you seek out and embrace, they'll buy your products too. Trust me. Don't worry about people not buying your stuff because maybe that's the reason. I mean, maybe that's, and that's just giving people the benefit of the doubt is they're worried about the consumer power that their followers have. But, I'd just rather have good people buying and supporting my business than people who are just not up to par with where we're going. Forward in this country. It's just that simple.
Well, Sherri, I know that you are getting an organization off the ground right now. You're still running your small business. You have a 3-year-old at home. I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I felt like it was really important to have this conversation. You have just been such a guiding light to me this last year and an inspiration. And I hope that people listen to your words and feel as inspired as I have felt by you and your power, and know that they have that power too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And likewise, thank you for everything that you do, not only for me, but for so many of us. And I think that this is just the beginning.
Thank you for joining us for my conversation with Sherri Powell. To learn more about Yours Rurally and peruse their beautiful collection of rurally based gift boxes, visit yoursrurally.com or on social media at yoursrurally. This was the last episode of our first season of the Urban Exodus podcast. We will be launching an exclusive bonus episode to our Patreon supporters next Saturday. In our bonus episode, we'll be speaking with Louisa Conrad of Big Picture Farm. Louisa is a native New Yorker who left city life to build a goat milk confectionery business with her partner Lucas in the mountains of Vermont. We talk about their journey into farming and building a diversified farm-based business through value-added products and agro-tourism. It's an informative and inspiring conversation, and I hope you'll tune in. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Urban Exodus. To read more in-depth features on folks who ditched the city and went country, visit our website, urbanexodus.com. An enormous thank you to my whole team who made this season possible. Production by Simone Leon, editing by Ari Snyder, and music by Benjamin Bethurum. I really couldn't have done it without you guys. Thank you so much. I'm Alyssa Hessler, and this is the Urban Exodus. Stay kind, stay joyful, stay resilient.